A child is found strangled, raped, and dismembered on her 10th birthday. By all accounts, everyone said she had a good mother. So, what happened on August 23rd, 2016? Who did she let in her apartment? Who was living there? And who had been watching her? Join me as we try to find out and solve this mystery. Please note that the content of this recording may contain graphic material, including torture, and explicit language may be used. The opinions are of my own and may be offensive to some listeners. They are my opinions. Everyone has them, and if you do not agree, then ignore them like an adult and move on. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Hey Ravens, welcome to the Ravens Knock. I'm your host, Amy. I want to thank you guys for liking, sharing, and subscribing, and also referring your friends. If you're not a premium member, you can do so for $7 a month, which is like a cup of coffee. It does help the show out, as podcasting is not free. And you get ad-free content, bonus episodes that no one else gets. And with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Victoria Martins turned 10 years old on the day that she was murdered. Unfortunately, she was raped, strangled, and dismembered in her own bedroom on her birthday. Victoria was described as a beautiful little girl who excelled in school. She was very smart, delightful, loved life, and loved everyone around her. Her mother, Michelle Martins, was described as a good mother. She had 2 children, kept a clean apartment. The kids stayed clean, and her apartment was adorned with pictures of her kids. She's the kind of mother who kept emergency numbers on the fridge right next to the kids' drawings. Michelle worked at the local grocery store, and she was a single parent. She was described as a people pleaser. Later, when she was interviewed by a psychiatrist, they stated that she was very much a people pleaser, so much so that she would say or do anything to make the other person happy, despite how it affected her. She is also a person who is very easily manipulated and very passive. At the end of July, Michelle meets a man off of the dating site called Plenty of Fish named Fabian Gonzalez. He immediately sees the perfect prey, and he immediately takes control over Michelle and her life. He uses her phone, drives her car while she is at work, tells her what to do, and she allows him to do whatever he pleases. She also does whatever he asks in order to please him. Neighbors began seeing a lot of people going in and out of her apartment once he came into her life. Fabian also moved himself in. August 23rd, 2016 was Victoria's birthday, but they were not celebrating. Victoria was home being watched by a stranger who had just gotten out of prison 4 days before. Her name was Jessica Kelly, and she was Fabian's cousin. Fabian told her that she could stay in Michelle's son's room for $50 until she got on her feet. Michelle didn't know this. She thought she was just staying a few days. Fabian knew Jessica's past, and he knew that she was violent, yet he invites her to live in a home with 2 children. He describes Jessica as off-the-chain kind of girl. You know, the perfect person you want around your kids. Jessica moved in on a Thursday, and Victoria would be dead by that Tuesday, 5 days later. Jessica, too, began to control the situation. She would also drive around in Michelle's car. She stayed high on drugs the entire time she was there. She also had both of her teenage kids come over and stay the night on 2 of the 5 nights she was there. She invited a man over late one night, had sex with him on the living room couch, just steps away from the kids. They could have gotten up at any time, but she didn't care. Jessica grew up with Fabian. She finished the 9th grade when she quit school due to her being pregnant. She said she was up against 200 years to life, but she pled no contest and got 50 years. She stated that she wasn't getting anything by testifying against her cousin. Her kids and her mother advised her what she needed to do, and that was the right thing, so that's what she was doing. She had previously been in prison for conspiracy, trafficking, and distribution of a controlled substance. When she got out of prison, she contacted Fabian on Facebook Messenger. They met up, and Fabian offered her a place to stay. She met Fabian at his girlfriend's house, not Michelle. Yeah, Fabian had a girlfriend besides Michelle. Then they left her house and went to meet more friends at a casino parking lot, and then went over to their house so she could babysit for her. Michelle and Victoria had came over at that time. Jessica left with Michelle, Fabian, and Victoria, went to another friend's house who lived by the casino so Jessica could put her number in his mailbox. This was after midnight on a Wednesday night, and Victoria had school the next morning. After this, Michelle dropped Jessica and Fabian off at Fabian's girlfriend's house, not knowing that was who she was, and then Michelle went home. Michelle came and picked them up at 6 a.m. the next morning. That morning, Michelle went with her mother somewhere, and Fabian and Jessica went to Walmart to go shopping. They took Michelle's car. When they returned, Michelle and Fabian left. They also left Victoria, and it wasn't until later when Jessica had went outside and saw Victoria on her scooter that she realized that they hadn't taken her. She was very upset that they didn't tell her, and no one had been watching her. She told Victoria to come into the house. She did, and began watching cartoons and doing her homework. During this time, Michelle and Fabian had returned home for about an hour, and Jessica had given Victoria $45 for her birthday. Fabian took Victoria to the bathroom and took the money from her, and then took her to the gas station where he bought her a Coke and himself a bottle of vodka. Number 1, no man is going to take my child into a bathroom that I just met, and he is a big piece of shit for taking that kid's birthday money. He returned, and him and Michelle left again. Again, I'm not going to leave my child with somebody I just met, especially somebody who had just gotten out of prison. Anyway, Victoria continued with her homework. Michelle and Fabian had gone to visit his 2 brothers, one to get some pot and the other for meth. They had been gone over 2 hours, and Michelle sat in the car the entire time. I don't know why she went with him if she was going to be sitting in the car, but who knows. Back at the apartment, Jessica was still high, and she was extremely paranoid. She had left the door cracked so she could see out the door. Victoria told her that she was going to go to her room and watch TV and put her pajamas on. Shortly after this, according to Jessica, An unknown man just walked in the door, acted as if he knew the place, and asked her if Fabian was there. She said, "He's not here." And he said, "Well, who is?" She said, "It's just me and the girl," and pointed to Victoria's room. He nodded and went to Victoria's room. She grabbed her cigarettes and went outside onto the balcony to smoke, not thinking anything was going to happen. When he came out, he looked at her and said, "I know Fabian fucked up. He knows he did, and you have a mess in there to clean up. And if you don't get it done and let him know about it, then it's going to be your life and your kid's life." And he walks out. At first, she thought he was playing. She walks outside to see where he came from, but she didn't see him. She then walks into Victoria's room. Victoria was laying on her back on the floor of her bedroom. She looked like she was sleeping, but she wasn't. She didn't have a pulse. He had killed her. When she heard Fabian's music, she picked up Victoria, threw a blanket over her, and took her outside. She made it down 2 steps and realized she wouldn't be able to carry her to them, so she put her back into her room. She was thinking that they could take her somewhere. When Fabian and Michelle came inside, Fabian had Michelle make tacos. Jessica took Fabian outside and told him everything that happened. He didn't believe her and went to check on Victoria. He came back out, and Jessica told him that they were going to have to get rid of her body. He was pissed. He said, "All right, we'll have to take turns distracting Michelle." After tacos, Fabian took Michelle into their room and convinced her to go to bed. She never checked on Victoria, never kissed her goodnight, and it was her birthday. He comes back out of the room and goes into Victoria's room. When Jessica goes into the room, Fabian had already begun cutting on her. He had put black trash bags in under her. She stated she never cut her, but she did hold her arms at one point. She thought she was going to be sick, so she left the room. She went into the kitchen and got a bowl of soapy water, took a breath of fresh air, and returned to the bedroom. When she opened the door, Fabian had cut her down from her chest to her stomach. He had a trash bag around his hand and had his hand inside her chest, removing her heart. She said, "What the fuck are you doing?" He said, "We gotta make it look like it wasn't us." I don't know how that's supposed to work. She told him to get the fuck out of there, that she would finish this. And so Fabian leaves the room and she begins to clean the blood off of Victoria. She redresses her and wraps her in plastic trash bags and a sheet. She said she cleaned that room for about an hour. She said the blood on the carpet was about 2 to 4 feet. She stated she didn't clean the knobs. That must have been Fabian. She then goes to the closet to get a sheet, and she notices an iron. She takes it out and places it on the table. She was scared. She didn't want to go back to prison. But if she was going to go back, she was going to make it worth it. She decided that she was going to kill Fabian and Michelle. Those were the only 2 people that could get her in trouble and send her back to jail. She asked Fabian's help to take Victoria to the bathroom and put her in the bathtub. At this point, she says she just loses it and decides to kill them that night. When asked why she didn't just call the police, she said that because she's a felon, no matter what the situation, she would still be in a position that she is in now, because with her history with the law, no matter what she would say, she would still be guilty. She said she was also afraid because she had been threatened and this guy was serious. I mean, he had just killed someone and she didn't want anything happening to anyone else. She then goes into Michelle's room and asks Michelle and Fabian for their phones. They look puzzled, but they hand them over. She leaves the room to go put the phones in her purse. They follow her. She turns around and asks Michelle if she believes in God. Michelle looks at her like she's crazy. And then Jessica hits her in the head and face area with the iron. Fabian takes the iron away from her. She tells Michelle that Victoria is dead, and she said that Michelle seemed like she didn't care, and that really upset her. So she started hitting her with her fist. Fabian pulls Michelle away and they leave the apartment. She was going to leave the apartment too, but realized that Victoria was still in the bathtub. Fabian and Michelle have went to the neighbor's apartment to call the police to report that Jessica had just assaulted Michelle. They both removed their socks and throw them into the trash. Now, if I were the neighbor, that would be a major red flag to me. The police come, 3 of them actually. This is early in the morning, and the police ask what's going on. Michelle states that Jessica hit her in the head and face with an iron. They notice a triangle mark on her forehead. They tell the officer that Jessica is still in the apartment along with her daughter, and that Jessica told her that her daughter was dead. Well, this really got their attention, so one officer stayed with them. The other 2 went over to Michelle's apartment to confront Jessica and to check on the child. Jessica, however, decided to light Victoria's body on fire. The police pounds on the door. Then they hear the smoke alarms, and they make their way inside. They immediately handcuff Jessica. They first go to the kitchen. All eyes on the stove are on, along with a pot of boiling water. They shut the stove off, but realize that the smoke is coming from the bathroom. They walk in, and what they see will scar them for the rest of their life. In the tub lay Victoria. The officer didn't want to contaminate the scene further by turning on the shower. And so he saw a cup. He took the cup, got some water, and poured it on her feet to put out the flames. Another officer took a pillowcase or a towel and put the fire out that was on her chest. What was odd is that there was no blood in the tub, but she was missing her arms, and one of her legs was almost severed, and her chest and abdomen had been cut so severely that her intestines were out of her body. EMS had arrived to look at Michelle, which was still at the neighbor's apartment, and then they called for a paramedic to come over to pronounce Victoria deceased. Paramedic broke down as she struggled to find the appropriate areas to place the leads in order to pronounce her. I could only imagine. I know where those leads go. The places that she needs to place those leads, she couldn't. But she pronounced her anyway. It was very obvious she was gone. All of them were put in handcuffs and put separately in each police car. They did end up taking Michelle to the hospital for her head injury before taking her to the station for questioning. CSI was called. The investigator stated that in his 10 years, it was the most gruesome scene he has ever processed. At first glance, the apartment appeared to be clean. However, when they sprayed it, it lit up. They had every supervisor they had at the crime lab there for that scene. Drops of blood was found outside the doorway. On the inside of the door, the inside doorknob, the entryway, just inside the kitchen. The towels in the laundry room. Victoria's underwear, socks, and jumper was in the garbage can in the kitchen. The kitchen sink had blood and flesh and some hair. The kitchen floor had blood that had been worn down by foot traffic. The refrigerator had blood swabs, blood splatter above the refrigerator and on the cabinets. The foyer area between the kitchen along the wall had blood. The living room walls, furnace door, on the carpet, the rug. There was an orange laundry hamper in the living room that contained blood. A purse had blood. The purse contained 2 phones. Underneath that was a garbage bag that felt as if it had human remains in it. That bag contained Victoria's arms, her heart, and part of her liver. More blood was found on a pillow in the living room, on a white towel in the living room. Blood on the master bedroom doorway. Drops of blood in a closet on a shoebox. The doorknob to the bathroom, on the balcony. Inside the bathroom, on a pillowcase, on the bathtub. In the bathtub contained Victoria's lifeless, mangled body. According to the blood trail, significant movement was made from the bedroom to the kitchen. In Victoria's room, blood on the door jamb, edge of the door, on the floor next to the door, all had blood. There was blood on the door, the blankets, blood on the carpet in the center of the room, and it was very large. Blood on a DVD case, the closet door, on wipes, the container that held the wipes, and on some books. Also on one of the knives they thought that was used to dismember Victoria. The medical examiner stated it usually takes 1 to 3 hours to do an autopsy, but in Victoria's case, it took 2 days. At first glance of the crime scene, there should have been more blood. First thing she looked for and saw was petechia hemorrhages in her eyes. She had them in both eyes. She had abrasions and bruising around the neck and left of the jaw, consistent with a hand and finger, like somebody had their hand over her mouth. She also had abrasions inside her mouth, consistent with pressure being placed over her mouth. She had bruising to her head, consistent with blunt force trauma, but it wasn't hard enough to bruise her brain. The muscles in her neck had hemorrhage in both the inter and external neck muscles, consistent with manual strangulation. Her brain showed no blood or oxygen coming to it. A knife was used to remove her arms, and it showed multiple attempts that were made. A CT scan showed a butterfly fracture to her arm, but this was after she had passed, as no signs of healing had occurred. You get this type of fracture by twisting. She had some bruising on her elbow, some scratches, and some abrasions to her arms. She was cut from above her nipples all the way down to her pubic bone. Her intestines were outside of her body. Her heart was absent, and also the left lobe of her liver. The sternum was also removed, which wasn't surprising, as this had to be removed in order to remove the heart. In order to remove the heart, you would have to have severed the superior and inferior vena cava from the right side of the heart, and then you have your right ventricle, and then you go up through the pulmonary artery to your lungs. That has to be cut. And then when the blood comes back to the heart, your right atria, there are 4 vessels that come into your left ventricle. And your left ventricle is a big one that pushes blood out through your aorta to the rest of your body. And that aorta also has to be severed. One of her legs was almost severed. She only suffered superficial burns from that fire. They only needed 4 milliliters of blood for a tox screen. If you've ever had your blood taken, that's 1 vial. but they were unable to obtain it. That's how much blood she was missing. So they had to send a piece of her liver and some fluid from her eyes. Her tox screen tested positive for caffeine. Everything happened after death, thank God, except for the strangulation. She died as a result. The manner, of course, is homicide. Michelle, her mother, did not have a criminal record in New Mexico, but she later told investigators that she would seek men online to engage in sexual acts with her 2 children, including Victoria, while she allegedly watched for pleasure. She also stated that she had given Victoria meth and alcohol to calm Victoria down so Fabian and Jessica could have sex with her. CPS had previously received 5 phone calls regarding the Martins household, but they come from Michelle herself, beginning in 2015. In late January 2017, 2 police spokespersons told the Albuquerque Journal that officers did investigate the referrals and stated that interviews with Victoria Martins and her mother had been conducted. However, this was revealed by the investigation to be false. In July 2017, CPS investigation discovered that one of the police spokespersons held correct information about the case but fabricated details in the January statements given to the Albuquerque Journal. Albuquerque's Citizen Police Oversight Agency voted for the officer, since removed from spokesperson's duties, to be suspended for 2 weeks. However, they modified this to a 1-day suspension, arguing that there was no evidence that the officer intentionally lied. Due to the disagreement, the case will be reviewed by an independent monitor overseeing the Albuquerque Police Department's reform. While investigating, cell phone records proved that Michelle had been lying. Her and Fabian had not ever been to the apartment while Victoria had been murdered. And if you remember, the medical examiner stated that the only thing that was in Victoria's system at the time of death was caffeine. So why did she say such horrible things about herself? A psychological profile showed that Michelle Martins had personality traits that made her susceptible to false confessions. During discussions with outside medical expert that interviewed Michelle, the doctor determined that Michelle made numerous false confessions in the case. She was very easily manipulated, very passive, and wants to please people and will say or do anything regardless of how it makes her look in order to please the other person. She also has a very low IQ. The judge handed down a sentence of 12 years in the New Mexico Department of Corrections, with 6 years of the credit served for the reckless abuse of a child resulting in death. That means Michelle will only serve 6 more years in prison as of the sentencing date. As for Jessica, the judge sentenced Jessica Kelly to 50 years in prison with 6 years suspended. Once Jessica is released from prison, she will be on probation for 5 years. Fabian got 37.5 years for reckless abuse of a child resulting in death, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to commit tampering with evidence. I don't know why that he and Jessica did not get charged with abuse of a corpse. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around how a mother would allow this to happen just to please a man. Now, there were text messages where she constantly would text Jessica asking her how Victoria was while she was watching her, in which Jessica did not respond back to her. But And it's obvious that before she got with those two, everybody, by all accounts, said that she was a very good mother, kept a very clean house. And from the body cams of the officers, her house was filled with pictures of her children. Her kids were happy. They were well taken care of. I don't know why she would call DCS on herself. Unless, of course, she just needed some sort of assistance or some sort of help. Granted, she does have a low IQ. I could see her being easily manipulated. But to that extent, that's hard for me to wrap my mind around. Now, granted, I do agree that she needed to be charged because she put her child in danger in that position. And I do agree that he definitely needs to be charged because he kind of set the situation up. He knew his cousin, he knew of her past, and yet he put all the things in place. Now, according to that mysterious man, Jessica was telling the truth. They did find a partial male DNA of a man that's unknown that did not match anybody else. So there was an unknown man that raped her. They just don't know who that is. So it's not like Jessica was lying about that. She was telling the truth, but they have yet to identify him. So somebody's walking around in New Mexico who has raped and strangled a little girl on her birthday. Apparently to get back at Fabian. But I guess what he don't realize is that's not Fabian's daughter. And in fact, he had only known the little girl for a month, if that. So it really probably didn't really affect him at all, other than the fact that he just had to cover it up. And now he's facing prison time for it. So I guess he did get him back in a sense because he's in prison. So you've got this dude walking around somewhere free until he screws up, and then hopefully they'll be able to find his DNA. Now, I don't know with the partial that they have if they're able to cross-reference that, for like the familiar DNA. I'm not sure about that. It would be nice if they could, and they end up, getting this bastard and putting him away for life for doing this. But hopefully, as time passes and science advances, that we would be able to put this guy away. Because this little girl, this precious little girl, her life ended way too soon over nothing. Nothing at all. And that wraps up this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe and share. If you can donate to this channel. Podcasting is not free. I definitely would appreciate it. Also, if you can be a premium member, you get your content ad-free, and also you get bonus episodes. This has been a Southern Sass production, and until next time, guys, avoid rest stops and be safe.